Have you ever received a text message that made your entire world collapse? I have. It was supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. Christmas at my sister Vanessa's new mountain home in Pinecrest Valley, twinkling lights reflecting off fresh snow, the scent of cinnamon and pine, family traditions passed down through generations. Everything was meant to be perfect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But nothing was perfect for me. I'm Rebecca. I'm 36, a bookstore manager, a sister, a mother to an incredible 12-year-old boy named Mason. But that evening, staring at my phone screen in my quiet kitchen, I felt like absolutely nobody. Just 3 days before Christmas, the message glowed harsh and clear. Hey Becca, having to downsize Christmas this year. Too many people, not enough space. Maybe we can do something in January instead? The text came after weeks of Mason and I planning our 4-hour drive to Pinecrest Valley. After I'd already wrapped all the presents, baked Grandma Ellie's famous cranberry cookies that Vanessa always raved about, and spent hours helping Mason perfect his handmade Christmas cards for each family member. After I'd requested time off from the bookstore during our busiest season, explaining to my boss how important this family Christmas was, I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone clutched in my trembling hand. The Christmas tree Mason and I had decorated together sparkled in the corner, mocking me with its cheerfulness. The special ornament he'd made for Vanessa, a tiny ceramic frame with a photo of them together from last summer, hung front and center. I couldn't bear to look at it. Mom, did Aunt Vanessa say if we need to bring snow boots? Mason's voice called from his bedroom, where he was already organizing his packing. I could hear the excitement bubbling in his voice, the pure, uncomplicated joy of a child anticipating Christmas magic. My throat tightened so much it hurt. Just a second, sweetie. I managed to call back, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I gripped the kitchen counter, trying to anchor myself as the room seemed to tilt sideways. The thing is, I knew exactly what downsizing Christmas meant. It meant Vanessa, her husband Gregory, my parents Jane and Robert, my younger brother Caleb, and his new girlfriend, and probably Gregory's side of the family, all celebrating together in that gorgeous timber and stone house. All of them except Mason and me. We were the ones being downsized. I took a deep breath and opened our family group chat. Sure enough, everyone else had received different messages about final arrangements. My mother had just texted about bringing extra folding chairs, since we'll have a full house. Caleb had shared a picture of the expensive wine he was bringing. No one had responded to these messages with surprise or questions about my absence. They already knew. Perhaps they had all discussed it, decided together that we were the expendable ones. I stared out my kitchen window at the modest street of our suburban neighborhood. Across the way, the Hendersons had outlined their entire house in multicolored lights. Their children were building a snowman in the front yard, laughing as they rolled increasingly larger balls of snow. Such a simple joy, so cruelly paralleled against the text still burning on my screen. Mason appeared in the doorway, his favorite holiday sweater already on, the one with a dinosaur wearing a Santa hat. Mom, you okay? His eyes, so perceptive, so much like mine, narrowed slightly, catching the distress I was trying desperately to hide. I straightened up, quickly wiping at my eyes. Yes, of course. Just checking last-minute details. Another lie. I seemed to be collecting them like unwanted gifts. What do you tell your child when your own family decides you're not worth including? When your sister's perfect Christmas doesn't have room for you? I didn't know. I only knew I couldn't let Mason feel the searing pain that was radiating through my chest. The worst part wasn't even the exclusion. It was the casual way it was delivered. A text message, not even a phone call. like canceling a dental appointment or rescheduling a coffee date. 3 days before Christmas, after weeks of planning, years of tradition, I had always been there for Vanessa. When she needed someone to proofread her college thesis at 2 a.m., I stayed up all night with her. When she got food poisoning on her honeymoon and called me crying from a hotel bathroom in Belize, I researched local doctors and stayed on the phone until Gregory returned with medication. When she needed help painting and furnishing the very mountain house where Christmas was now happening without us, I spent 3 weekends driving up to help, often with Mason entertaining himself while we worked. But now, staring at that glowing screen, I realized none of it mattered. In the story of Vanessa's life, I was just a minor character who could be edited out when the narrative got too crowded. Mom? Mason was still waiting for an answer about the snow boots, his expectant face so full of innocent excitement it made my heart fracture a little more. I had 2 choices. I could tell him the truth, that his perfect Christmas with his cousins and grandparents had been canceled via text message, that apparently we weren't important enough to include, that the cookies we baked together, the presents we wrapped, the cards he made were all for nothing. Or I could find another way. Mason, I said, setting my phone down and kneeling to his level. How would you feel about doing something a little different for Christmas this year? His brow furrowed slightly. Different how? We're still going to Aunt Vanessa's, right? I took a deep breath. I was thinking we might create our own special Christmas adventure instead. Just you and me. Mason's face fell, the disappointment so raw and immediate that I almost changed my mind, almost decided to drive to Pinecrest Valley anyway, invited or not. But something stopped me, a small flame of dignity that refused to be extinguished. But we always go to family Christmas, he said, his voice small. I made everyone cards, and I've been practicing that Christmas song on my tablet to show everyone. The tablet. Mason had spent weeks creating a special digital Christmas card on his tablet, complete with music and photos. He was so proud of it, so excited to show his technological creation to the family. I know, buddy, I said, gently touching his shoulder. Sometimes plans change. But we can make this amazing, I promise. We can make new traditions. He looked, down at his socked feet, then back up at me, eyes suddenly sharp with perception beyond his years. Did they say we can't come? That simple question, so direct, so unavoidable. I hadn't planned to tell him the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to lie, not when he was looking at me with such clear, trusting eyes. Aunt Vanessa said there isn't enough space this year, I answered carefully. Mason was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with a stillness that worried me. Then he asked the question that broke what was left of my heart. Is it because of me? Because I broke that fancy glass thing last year by accident? No, I said instantly, pulling him into a tight hug. Absolutely not. This has nothing to do with you. Nothing at all. But as I held him, feeling his small body against mine, I knew he didn't fully believe me. How could he? Children have an uncanny ability to absorb blame, to find ways to make adult cruelty somehow their fault. What I didn't know then, as we stood in our kitchen with Christmas lights twinkling mockingly around us, was that Mason wasn't just absorbing this moment. He was making a plan that would change everything. A plan that would show everyone exactly what family really means. I just held him tighter, unaware that my 12-year-old son was about to rewrite our family's story in a way none of us would ever forget. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room long after Mason had gone to bed, staring at our Christmas tree and the pile of wrapped presents beneath it. Each gift had been chosen with such care: a leather-bound journal for my father, a vintage brooch for my mother, that I'd hunted down for months in antique shops, a rare vinyl record for Caleb. For Vanessa, I'd found a first edition copy of the book we'd both loved as teenagers, the one we used to read aloud to each other during summer thunderstorms. Now, these presents sat in silent judgment of my naivety. Of course I wasn't invited. Of course the family Christmas had no room for us. It had been this way for years, hadn't it? The gradual erosion of my place in the family, so subtle I barely noticed until this moment when the foundation finally collapsed. When morning came, I made pancakes shaped like Christmas trees and tried to sound enthusiastic as I described alternative holiday plans to Mason. A movie marathon, ice skating in Westfield Park, a special dinner at Rosalind's, the Italian restaurant that was normally impossible to get into but might have space for a last-minute reservation for two. Mason nodded along, but I could see he wasn't convinced. He pushed his pancakes around his plate, the Christmas tree shape dissolving into a green-tinged mess. "Can I still take my tablet?" he asked suddenly. "Of course," I said, puzzled. "You can take it wherever we go." He nodded again, more decisively, this time. "I'm going to finish my Christmas project anyway." His determination both warmed and worried me. I didn't want him clinging to plans that now existed only in our memory, but I admired his persistence. That's always been Mason, quietly stubborn, unwilling to let go once he sets his mind to something. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a call from my mother. My heart leapt. Perhaps they'd reconsidered, realized how hurtful the exclusion was. I answered immediately. "Rebecca, dear, are you still coming by before you head up to Vanessa's? I have those photo albums you wanted to borrow." I froze, confusion. Stealing my words. Did she not know? Had Vanessa not told them? "Mom," I said carefully. "Vanessa texted me yesterday. She said Christmas is downsized this year, that there's not enough room for us." A long pause followed, the kind that stretches into uncomfortable territory. "Oh," my mother finally said, her voice strained. "Well, I'm sure she just meant there might be some sleeping arrangements to figure out. You know how Gregory is about having the house perfect. She specifically said not to come, Mom, that maybe we could do something in January instead." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Let me talk to her and call you back." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, a new kind of hurt blooming. My mother hadn't known, or at least pretended not to know, which meant Vanessa had made this decision unilaterally. And based on my mother's reaction, she wasn't going to challenge it. Mason appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, his tablet clutched in his hands. "Was that Grandma? Are we going to Christmas after all?" The hope in his voice made my chest ache. "Not yet, sweetie. She's going to call back." True to her word, my mother called back 20 minutes later. I answered on the first ring. "I spoke with Vanessa," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "She explained that with Gregory's parents coming, plus his sister and her husband and their new baby, plus Caleb and Diane, the house is at capacity. There are only so many bedrooms, Rebecca." "We could sleep on the couch," I said, hating how pathetic I sounded. "Or get a hotel nearby. We always spend Christmas together, Mom." "I know, dear, but Vanessa is hosting this year, and it's her decision. She suggested you come for New Year's instead. Wouldn't that be nice? A special New Year's celebration?" I closed my eyes, willing away the stinging sensation behind them. "So everyone will be there for Christmas except Mason and me?" My mother sighed. "It's not personal, Rebecca. It's just logistics. You know how these things are." But it was personal. It was deeply, painfully personal. And the fact that my own mother couldn't see that, or worse, chose not to acknowledge it, cut deeper than Vanessa's text. "Sure, Mom. Logistics." "Don't be like that, dear. You've always been so sensitive. Remember when you cried at your 8th birthday party because Vanessa got more attention than you? Some things never change." Her words hit like a slap. I wasn't 8 anymore, crying over party games. I was a grown woman being excluded from a family Christmas, and my mother was defending it. "I have to go, Mom." I hung up without waiting for a response. Mason was standing in the hallway again, his face pale. I realized too late that he'd heard everything. The careful facade I'd been maintaining crumbled completely. "They don't want us there at all, do they?" he asked quietly. I knelt down and took his hands in mine. "It's complicated, Mason. Adult relationships sometimes get messy, but it has nothing to do with you. I promise." "You always say that, but it's not true," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "It's about both of us. We're a package deal." The simple wisdom in his words stunned me. We were a package deal. Ever since Roger left when Mason was 4, it had been just the two of us against the world. My family had never fully approved of Roger. He was too unconventional, too artistic, not stable enough by their standards. When he left us for a graphic design opportunity in Europe, their sympathetic looks barely concealed their "I told you so" attitudes. Perhaps that was part of it. Perhaps I was a walking reminder of what they saw as my greatest failure, my impractical choice in a partner, my messy divorce. Mason, with his artistic temperament so like his father's, was further evidence of my poor judgment in their eyes. "You're right," I said finally. "We are a package deal, and anyone who doesn't want both of us doesn't deserve either of us." Mason nodded, a hint of a smile returning to his face. He held up his tablet. "I'm still working on my Christmas project. It's going to be even better than I planned." Something in his determined expression gave me pause. "What exactly are you working on?" "Just some videos," he said vaguely. "Old Christmas stuff. It's a surprise." Before I could question him further, my phone buzzed with another text, this time from Caleb. "Heard about the Christmas situation. That sucks. If it helps, I didn't know until Mom just told me. Want me to talk to Vanessa?" A small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least Caleb hadn't been part of the decision. I texted back, "Thanks, but don't rock the boat on my account. Enjoy Christmas." I meant it too. Despite the hurt, I didn't want to ruin everyone else's holiday. That's always been my role in the family, the peacekeeper, the one who smooths things over, who doesn't make waves. Perhaps that's why it was so easy to exclude me. They knew I wouldn't fight back. What I didn't realize then was that while I might not fight back, Mason had other ideas. Later that evening, I found him in his room, hunched over his tablet, headphones on, intensely focused. When he noticed me in the doorway, he quickly locked the screen. "Just finishing something," he said with a mysterious smile. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid more attention to that smile, to the determined set of his shoulders. But I was too wrapped up in my own hurt, in rearranging Christmas plans, in pretending to Mason that I wasn't devastated. I didn't know that my son was sifting through years of family videos stored in our cloud account. I didn't know that he was carefully selecting clips, editing them together, creating something that would make it impossible for our family to look away, to pretend, to maintain the convenient fiction that excluding us was just about logistics. I didn't know that in his quiet, methodical way, Mason was about to shatter the carefully constructed image my sister had built for herself, and that by doing so, he would force our entire family to see what had been in front of them all along. Growing up in the Harlow family, I always understood my position in the hierarchy. Vanessa was the golden child, beautiful, charming, ambitious. 2 years younger than me, but somehow always miles ahead in our parents' estimation. She was the one whose drawings covered the refrigerator, whose dance recitals warranted professional photography, whose academic achievements were announced to every relative and family friend. I was the reliable one, the steady presence, the caretaker. When Vanessa needed a ride to the mall, I drove her. When she forgot her science project, I stayed up all night helping her recreate it. When she had a fight with her boyfriend, I was the shoulder she cried on. I was the backdrop against which her specialness could shine. It wasn't that our parents didn't love me. They did, in their way. But love in the Harlow household came with conditions, with expectations. Vanessa naturally met those expectations. She was magnetic, a social butterfly, the kind of daughter you bragged about at dinner parties. I was quieter, more introspective, content with books and small groups of friends rather than being the center of attention. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unspoken question that shadowed my childhood. Not said directly, of course, but implied in every comparison, every sigh when I preferred staying home to attending social events, every time my solid B grades were acknowledged with a nod while Vanessa's occasional A's warranted celebration. Dinners. Caleb, born 5 years after Vanessa, somehow escaped this dynamic. As the only boy, the youngest child, he existed in a category all his own. He was afforded freedoms neither Vanessa nor I ever had. Allowed to pursue his interest in music without pressure to excel, permitted to change majors in college twice, without lectures about commitment, given space to find his path on his own terms. The pattern followed us into adulthood. When I married Roger at 23, my parents barely concealed their disapproval. He was an artist, a dreamer with wild curly hair and paint-stained hands. "But how will he provide?" my mother had whispered during our engagement party, as if financial stability was the only measure of a good partner. When Mason was born a year later, they were loving grandparents, but always with an air of reservation, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. When Roger left us 3 years later for his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in Berlin, taking his art and leaving behind a mountain of debt, their sympathy came wrapped in an invisible, "We told you so." Vanessa, meanwhile, followed the approved script perfectly. She finished her business degree, landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm, and at 28 married Gregory Pemberton, son of a judge, Harvard law graduate, owner of a vacation home at 32. Their wedding was a lavish affair at the Westbrook Country Club, my parents beaming as they posed for photographs with the perfect couple. I was maid of honor, of course. I helped Vanessa select her dress, arranged her bridal shower, calmed her pre-wedding jitters, ran last-minute errands the morning of the ceremony. I did everything a sister should do, and more. I was genuinely happy for her. I'd never begrudged her success or our parents' obvious preference. It was just the way things had always been. When Vanessa and Gregory bought the mountain house in Pinecrest Valley 2 years ago, it became the new center of family gatherings. No more holidays at our parents' house in Meadowbrook. Now Christmas meant the picture-perfect setting of Vanessa's timber and stone mansion, with its soaring ceilings, wall of windows overlooking the mountain range, and professional-grade kitchen where Gregory could show off his culinary hobby. Last Christmas had been the first one there. Mason and I had driven the 4 hours through a snowstorm to arrive. I'd brought 3 homemade pies and all the presents, carefully wrapped weeks in advance. Mason, then 11, had been vibrating with excitement. The weekend had gone reasonably well until the incident with the crystal vase. A wedding gift from one of Gregory's partners, displayed prominently on a side table in their great room. Mason hadn't broken it maliciously. He'd been playing a game with Caleb, their laughter filling the house as they tossed a soft ball back and forth. One wild throw, a quick dive to catch it, and the vase had toppled, shattering across the polished hardwood floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory's face had darkened, Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. My father had cleared his throat uncomfortably, while my mother immediately began apologizing on Mason's behalf. "I'm so sorry," Mason had whispered, staring at the glittering shards in horror. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't," I'd said quickly, moving to put an arm around his shoulders. "It was an accident. We'll replace it." Gregory had forced a tight smile. "It was from Italy. Hand-blown glass. One of a kind, actually. The implication hung heavy in the air. We couldn't replace it, not really. Not with my bookstore manager's salary. Not with the child support checks from Roger that arrived sporadically at best. "We have insurance," Vanessa had said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "Don't worry about it, Becca." But the atmosphere had changed. For the rest of the weekend, Mason had been quiet, careful, trying to take up less space. I'd caught Gregory watching him with thinly veiled annoyance whenever he moved too quickly or laughed too loudly. The eggshells we walked on seemed to cover every inch of that beautiful house. When we'd left, Vanessa had hugged me stiffly at the door. "Next year will be easier," she'd said. "We'll have the renovations done and more space." I'd thought she meant more space would make things more comfortable. Now I understood she had meant more space between us and them. The irony was that despite everything, I still loved my sister. I still remembered the little girl who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd worn my hand-me-downs without complaint when our parents were stretching finances to pay for her dance lessons, who'd cried genuine tears at my wedding even, though she thought Roger was wrong for me. Somewhere under the polished exterior of Vanessa Pemberton was still Nessa Harlow, who'd once promised we'd live next door to each other when we grew up, so our kids could be best friends. The sister who'd held my hand when our grandmother died, who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd been the first person to hold Mason after he was born. That's what made the exclusion so painful. Not just the rejection itself, but the knowledge that the person rejecting me knew exactly how much it would hurt. She knew what Christmas meant to me, knew how Mason looked forward to the family tradition all year. She knew, and she'd done it anyway, with the casual cruelty of a text message sent between meetings, and our parents had backed her decision. Of course they had. They always did. The morning after my conversation with my mother, I woke to find Mason already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his tablet propped against the cereal box, fingers flying across the screen. "You're up early," I observed, reaching for the coffee pot. "Almost done," he said without looking up. "Just need to put the finishing touches on it." "On what, exactly?" I asked, peering over his shoulder. He tilted the screen away. "It's a surprise." "Mom! For Christmas!" I sighed, pouring coffee into my mug. "Mason, honey, I know you're disappointed about not going to Aunt Vanessa's, but we need to focus on our new plans. I thought maybe we could drive to Silver Springs and stay at that hotel with the indoor water park you liked last year." Mason looked up at me, his expression oddly mature for a 12-year-old. "We're still going to Aunt Vanessa's," he said with quiet certainty. I set my coffee down carefully. "Sweetie, we can't. They've made it clear we're not welcome this year." "We're going," he repeated. "Trust me, Mom." Something in his voice gave me pause. Mason had always been perceptive, observant in a way that sometimes unnerved me. He noticed things other people missed, the slight tightening around my eyes when I was trying not to cry, the careful way I budgeted at the grocery store, the subtle shifts in family dynamics during gatherings. "What are you planning?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. He smiled, a small, determined smile that reminded me startlingly of Roger. "I'm just putting together some old videos, family stuff, Christmas memories, for tradition." Before I could question him further, my phone rang. Vanessa's face flashed on the screen. A photo from happier times, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke, arms around each other's shoulders. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Becca." Vanessa's voice was brisk, professional, her marketing, executive tone. "Mom tells me you're upset about Christmas." I closed my eyes, counted to 3. "I'm not upset, Vanessa. I'm hurt. There's a difference. Look, it's not personal. We just have limited space with Gregory's family coming and—" "Save it," I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "If you wanted us there, you'd make room. We both know that." A pause, then a sigh. "It's complicated, Becca. Gregory's Still not over that vase Mason broke last year, and his parents are bringing their new Himalayan cat that cost more than my first car. And you know how Mason gets when he's excited. We just thought this year might be better if what? If the messy parts of your family didn't show up to ruin your perfect Christmas? That's not fair, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Tell me something, Vanessa. When was the last time I asked anything of you? When was the last time I wasn't there when you needed me? The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. That's what I thought, I said softly. Merry Christmas, Vanessa. I hung up, hands shaking. Mason was watching me, his eyes wide. Was that Aunt Vanessa? He asked. I nodded, unable to speak, around the lump in my throat. Perfect, he said, turning back to his tablet with renewed focus. That's the last thing I needed. Something about his tone sent a chill through me. What exactly was my son planning? And why did I have the distinct feeling that Christmas was about to become something none of us expected? 2 days before Christmas, I still hadn't made final plans for Mason and me. Each alternative I considered felt hollow, a poor substitute. For the family tradition we'd been excluded from, I'd scroll through hotel websites, look at holiday events in nearby towns, then close my laptop, unable to commit to anything. Mason, meanwhile, had become increasingly secretive about his tablet project. He'd disappear into his room for hours, emerging only for meals and then retreating again. When I asked what he was working on, he'd give me the same mysterious smile and say, "You'll see, Mom. It's going to fix everything." I didn't have the heart to tell him that some things couldn't be fixed, especially not by a 12-year-old boy with a tablet, no matter how clever he was. Some fractures in families ran too deep, had been forming for too many years. That evening, as I was folding laundry and half watching a Christmas movie I'd seen a dozen times before, my phone rang. It was Caleb. "Hey, Becca," he said when I answered. There was noise in the background, Christmas music, laughter, the clink of glasses. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I said, muting the TV. "What's up?" "I'm at Mom and Dad's. We're heading up to Vanessa's tomorrow instead of Christmas Eve. Weather forecast is showing a big storm coming." My stomach twisted. They were all gathering a day early, making the exclusion even more pointed. "Thanks for letting me know," I said stiffly. "Look, I've been thinking about this whole situation," Caleb continued, his voice dropping. "It's not right what Vanessa's doing. I told her so." A small warmth bloomed in my chest. At least someone was on my side. "Thanks, Caleb. But I don't want to create drama." He snorted. "You're not creating anything. This is all Vanessa and her need to have everything perfect all the time. And honestly, I think it's more Gregory than her. He's been weird ever since the vase thing." "It was just a vase," I said, frustration bubbling up. "An accident. Mason still feels terrible about it." "I know that. And deep down, Vanessa knows it too. She's just... You know how she gets when she's trying to impress people. And Gregory's parents are definitely people she's always trying to impress." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "So what am I supposed to do? Crash Christmas? Show up uninvited with our suitcases and presents and force them to let us in?" The line went quiet for a moment. Then Caleb said something that changed everything. "Actually, yeah, that's exactly what you should do." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "You can't be serious." "I am. Look, Mom and Dad are on Vanessa's side, because they always take the path of least resistance. But if you were actually here, they wouldn't turn you away. Not on Christmas. Not with Mason." "I don't know, Caleb." "Trust me, I've got a plan. I'm driving up with Mom and Dad tomorrow, but I'll text you when everyone's having dinner. Come up then. I'll make sure the front door is unlocked. By the time they realize you're there, it'll be too awkward for them to ask you to leave." The idea was insane. Completely insane. And yet, "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Do more than think about it, Becca. Do it. For Mason. For yourself. His voice softened. I miss you, sis. It's not the same without you too. After we hung up, I sat in the silent living room, the muted TV casting flickering lights across the walls. The idea was starting to take root. Show up uninvited, force the issue, make them face me directly instead of hiding behind text messages and excuses. But what if they did turn us away in person? What if Mason had to watch his grandparents, his aunt and uncle, reject us to our faces? The thought was unbearable. I was still wrestling with the decision when Mason wandered in, his tablet tucked under his arm. Mom? I need to ask you something important. I patted the couch beside me, and he sat down, his expression unusually serious, for a boy his age. What's on your mind, sweetheart? He took a deep breath. I want to go to Aunt Vanessa's for Christmas. My heart sank. We were back to this. Mason, honey, we've talked about this. We can't. We can, he interrupted, his voice steady. Uncle Caleb says everyone's going up tomorrow because of the storm. We should go too. I stared at him. You talked to Uncle Caleb? Mason nodded. He called me this morning. He says we should just show up, that nobody will make us leave once we're there. The fact that Caleb had called Mason directly, had put this idea in his head before even talking to me, sent a flare of anger through me. It's not that simple, Mason. Yes, it is. His eyes, so like Roger's, held a determination that caught me off guard. I've finished my Christmas project and I need to be there to show everyone. What exactly is this project? I asked, reaching for his tablet. You've been so secretive about it. He pulled it back, holding it against his chest. It's a surprise, Mom, but it's important. Really important. I studied his face, noting the set of his jaw, the absolute conviction in his eyes. Whatever he'd created, he believed in it completely. Even if we went, I said carefully, there's no guarantee they'd welcome us. It could be uncomfortable. I know, he said simply. But sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to fix things. You taught me that. His words hit me like a physical force. I had taught him that, hadn't I? When he struggled with math last year, when he wanted to quit his piano lessons because they were too hard, when he had a fight with his best friend and didn't want to be the first to apologize. Face the uncomfortable thing, I'd told him. That's how we grow. Was I failing to follow my own advice? Taking the easier path of hurt feelings and alternative plans rather than confronting the messy, uncomfortable truth of my family's dynamics? Let me see what you've been working on, I said finally. Then we'll decide. Mason hesitated, then slowly handed me his tablet. It's not quite finished. I need to add one more thing tomorrow, but this is most of it. I took the tablet, unlocked the screen, and pressed play on the video that filled the display. What unfolded before me was both simple and devastating. Mason had compiled years of family videos, Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, summer barbecues, casual moments captured on phones and cameras. But he hadn't chosen the typical highlights, the posed family photos or carefully orchestrated holiday moments. Instead, he'd found the in-between moments, the raw truth of our family that no one acknowledged. There was Vanessa, tearfully calling me at midnight before a major presentation, panic in her voice. The video shifted to me arriving at her apartment with coffee and note cards, helping her practice until dawn. There was Vanessa, food poisoning on her honeymoon, crying on a video call while I researched Belizean doctors and pharmacies, staying on the line for hours. There was Vanessa, overwhelmed during the renovation of the mountain house, and me painting walls while Mason entertained himself in the corner. But the most powerful clips were the Christmas ones. Year after year of me arriving early to help cook, staying late to clean up, wrapping presents for my parents because my mother's arthritis made it difficult, driving 8 hours round trip to pick up the special ham my father insisted on from a specific butcher, taking family photos where everyone posed while I stood behind the camera, The pattern was undeniable, unavoidable when presented this way. All the times I had shown up for my family, all the ways I had made their lives easier. Smoother, better, with no acknowledgement, no reciprocation. Just the expectation that of course Rebecca would handle it, of course she would help, of course she would give without expecting anything in return. The video ended with a clip from last Christmas, Mason apologizing for the broken vase, tears in his eyes, and Gregory saying coldly, "Some things can't be replaced." Then the screen faded to a simple message in Mason's careful handwriting. Family isn't about perfect houses or expensive vases. It's about who shows up, even when it's hard. I sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face. "Do you see?" "Why we have to go?" Mason asked quietly. "They need to see this. All of them." I looked at my son, this perceptive, brave child who had seen what I had been unwilling to acknowledge for years. The pattern of giving without receiving, of making myself small to make room for Vanessa's bigness, of teaching my son that this was what love looked like. "Mason," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "when did you get so wise?" He shrugged, but I could see he was pleased. "I just watched, and I remembered. That's all." I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly as the reality of what we were considering sank in. If we showed up at Vanessa's tomorrow, if Mason shared this video, there would be no going back. The carefully maintained fiction of our family would be shattered. The unspoken truths would be spoken. The delicate balance that had preserved the status quo for years would be upended. It was terrifying. It was necessary. "Okay," I said finally, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "We'll go, but whatever happens afterward, good or bad, we face it together. Deal?" Mason's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Deal." That night, I packed our bags while Mason put the finishing touches on his video. I wrapped the presents I'd planned to give the family and carefully placed them in the trunk of our car. I checked the weather forecast. The storm was indeed coming, which meant we needed to leave early to beat the worst of it. As I moved through these practical tasks, a strange calm settled over me. For years, I had been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, who never caused trouble. Tomorrow, that would change. Tomorrow, we would take up space, demand to be seen, refuse to be convenient or easily dismissed. I texted Caleb. "We're coming. Should arrive around 6 p.m. Make sure the door is unlocked." His response came immediately. "About time. Drive safe. See you tomorrow." I set my phone down and looked around our small, cozy living room with its slightly lopsided Christmas tree and homemade decorations. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a showplace like Vanessa's mountain house. But it was honest and warm and real. Tomorrow, we would bring that honesty to Pinecrest Valley, ready or not, and nothing would ever be the same again. We left home at noon. On December 23rd, the sky already darkening with approaching storm clouds. I drove with a strange mix of dread and determination, while Mason sat beside me, his tablet balanced on his knees as he made last-minute adjustments to his video. "What are you adding?" I asked, glancing over at him. "The ending," he said simply. It needed something else. The 4-hour drive to Pinecrest Valley stretched to nearly 6 as the weather worsened. Snow began falling more heavily with each passing mile, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up. By the time we reached the winding mountain road that led to Vanessa's neighborhood, visibility was poor, and the roads were becoming treacherous. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea," I murmured, gripping the steering wheel tightly as we navigated yet another hairpin turn. "The weather's getting worse. We could turn back, find a hotel." "We're almost there, Mom," Mason said, peering through the snowy windshield. "Just a little further." He was right. Despite the conditions, I knew these roads well enough. We were less than 20 minutes from Vanessa's house. Turning back now seemed more dangerous than continuing forward. As we climbed higher into the mountains, The snow fell even more thickly, blanketing the pines and obscuring the road markers. The tension in my shoulders was becoming a full-blown headache, but I pressed on, focusing on the taillights of the car ahead of us, using them as a guide. Finally, the ornate wooden sign for Ridgeline Estates came into view, barely visible through the swirling snow. I turned onto the private road, where the houses became progressively larger and more impressive. Vanessa and Gregory's home sat at the very end of the cul-de-sac, a massive timber and stone structure with a 3-car garage and a wall of windows facing the valley. Even through the snow, I could see that the house was ablaze with light. Every window glowed warmly, and the professional-grade exterior Christmas lights outlined the roofline in white, undimmed by the weather. Several cars were already parked. In the circular driveway, my parents' Lincoln, Caleb's Subaru, and 2 vehicles I didn't recognize that must belong to Gregory's family. I parked on the street, not wanting to block anyone in the driveway. For a long moment, I sat with the engine running, heat blasting against the chill that seemed to be coming from inside me rather than outside. "Mom?" Mason's voice was soft, concerned. "Are you okay?" I looked at him, this brave, perceptive boy, who had seen what needed to be done when I couldn't. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if this makes everything worse?" He reached over and took my hand, his smaller fingers squeezing mine with surprising strength. "It can't get worse, Mom. They uninvited us from Christmas." There was a simple wisdom in his words that cut through my anxiety. He was right. What could be worse than being told you weren't welcome at your own family's Christmas celebration? "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." We gathered our overnight bags and the presents from the trunk, then trudged through the accumulating snow toward the front door. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain Mason could hear it, even over the howling wind. I tried the door handle, relieved when it turned easily. Caleb had kept his word. As we stepped into the grand entryway, warmth and the smell of Christmas dinner enveloped us. Pine garlands wound around the staircase, and an enormous tree, at least 10 feet tall, dominated the great room beyond. Professional-looking, wrapped gifts were artfully arranged beneath it, each one color-coordinated with the gold and burgundy theme of the decorations. From the dining room came the sound of conversation and laughter, the clink of silverware against china, the pop of a wine cork. They were in the middle of dinner, exactly as Caleb had predicted. Mason and I stood in the entryway, snow melting from our boots onto the heated marble floor, our arms full of hastily wrapped presents and overnight bags. For a wild moment, I considered turning around, slipping back out before anyone noticed us. But then Mason stepped forward, his face set with determination. "Come on, Mom," he whispered. "It's time." We moved together toward the dining room, our footsteps muffled by the thick area rug. As we reached the arched entrance, the conversation suddenly died. 8 faces turned toward us in various expressions of shock. Vanessa, at the head of the table in a burgundy cashmere sweater, her hair swept into an elegant updo, froze with a wine glass halfway to her lips. Gregory, beside her, narrowed his eyes, his jaw tightening visibly. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. An older couple who must be Gregory's parents stared openly. A stylish woman around Vanessa's age, Gregory's sister, I presumed, whispered something to her husband. And Caleb, bless him, broke into a wide grin. "Becca! Mason! You made it!" he exclaimed, standing up as if their arrival was completely expected. Thank God. We were getting worried with the storm. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother recovered, setting down her fork with a trembling hand. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Vanessa stood up, her movements stiff. "Yes, what are you doing here? I thought we discussed this." I opened my mouth, but no words came. After all the rehearsing in my head during the call, drive, all the imagined confrontations, I found myself speechless now that the moment had arrived. But Mason wasn't. He stepped forward, his tablet clutched tightly against his chest. "We came for Christmas," he said simply. "Because that's what family does." Gregory's mother, a thin woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair, looked confused. "I don't understand. Weren't they expected?" An uncomfortable silence fell as everyone looked at Vanessa, waiting for her explanation. Her face flushed red, then pale. "There was a misunderstanding," she said finally. "About space. With everyone here. There are 12 chairs at this table and only 8 people," Mason observed, his voice remarkably steady. "That's not a space problem." Gregory set down his wine glass with excessive care. "Young man, I don't think it's your place to—" "Actually," Caleb interrupted, "the kid's right. There's plenty of room. Always has been." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Well, they're here now. Come. Sit down, Rebecca Mason. We'll have Rosa set 2 more places." Vanessa shot him a betrayed look. "Dad, you don't understand. We discussed this. The sleeping arrangements. They can have the guest room over the garage," Gregory's mother said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's not as if we're turning family away on Christmas Eve in a blizzard, for heaven's sake." She looked at me directly. "I'm Evelyn, by the way, Gregory's mother. Do sit down, dear. You look frozen." The authority in her voice seemed to silence Vanessa's objections. Gregory signaled to a woman hovering in the kitchen doorway, the housekeeper Rosa, who immediately began setting 2 more places at the table. I felt as if I'd stepped into an alternate reality. This wasn't at all how I'd imagined this confrontation playing out. We moved toward the table like sleepwalkers, setting down our bags near the entrance. Caleb pulled out the chair next to him for me, while Mason took the seat on my other side. As Rosa served us portions of the roast beef and potatoes, conversation gradually resumed around us, though it felt strained and artificial. My mother kept shooting me nervous glances. My father seemed determined to pretend nothing unusual had happened, launching into a story about a colleague's retirement party. Gregory's sister, Charlotte, I soon learned, kept looking between Vanessa and me with undisguised curiosity. Through it all, Mason sat quietly beside me, his tablet now tucked carefully beside his plate. I could feel the weight of his plan hanging over us, the inevitable moment when he would share what he had created. My stomach was in knots, my appetite non-existent despite the perfectly prepared food in front of me. Vanessa barely looked at us, focused intently on cutting her meat into increasingly smaller pieces. Gregory maintained a civil but cold demeanor, refilling wine glasses and steering conversation toward safe topics like the upcoming ski season and Charlotte's recent promotion, as dinner wound down and Rosa began clearing plates for dessert. Mason caught my eye and nodded slightly. My heart rate doubled instantly. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the table during a lull in conversation, "before dessert, I have a Christmas present I'd like to share with everyone." All eyes turned to him. Vanessa's expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "That's very thoughtful, Mason," my mother said carefully. "But perhaps we should wait until Christmas morning to open gifts?" Mason shook his head. "This one can't wait. It's for all of us, but especially for Aunt Vanessa and Uncle Gregory." Before anyone could object, he stood up, tablet in hand. "It's in the living room, on the big TV. I already connected it while everyone was talking." The confidence in his voice startled me. When had he done that? I realized he must have slipped away during dinner, unnoticed in the awkward conversation, to set up his plan. My clever, determined son. "Well," Evelyn said, clearly charmed by Mason. "I, for one, am intrigued. Let's see this special present." She stood up, effectively ending any debate. One by one, the others followed. Gregory reluctantly, Vanessa looking like she might be ill. We moved into the great room, where the enormous television above the stone fireplace was indeed already on, displaying the pause screen of Mason's video. Mason positioned himself near the television, suddenly looking much older than his 12 years. "This is about our family," he said simply, "about what Christmas really means." Then he pressed play, and everything changed. The screen filled with the opening image, our family 5 Christmases ago, all together at my parents' house. Vanessa and I were side by side on the couch, arms around each other, laughing at something, off camera. The contrast to our current strained relationship couldn't have been more stark. From that moment on, no one spoke. No one moved. We all stood transfixed as Mason's carefully curated clips played out the truth of our family dynamics for everyone to see. The video lasted exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. In that short time, years of family history unfolded with devastating clarity. The moments Mason had captured weren't just random memories. They told a story none of us had been willing to acknowledge. There was the Christmas when I'd driven 8 hours in a snowstorm to pick up my father's special ham when the delivery service canceled. The Easter when Vanessa had food poisoning and I cooked the entire meal while she recovered. The Thanksgiving when Gregory criticized my pumpkin pie, not knowing I'd made it from our grandmother's recipe because Vanessa had been too busy with work. But more powerful than these obvious examples were the quiet moments Mason had somehow found. Vanessa calling me in tears when she thought her pregnancy test was positive. It wasn't. Me dropping everything to sit with her while she waited for a second test. Me helping Gregory set up his surprise anniversary dinner for Vanessa, spending hours stringing lights in their backyard while she thought I was taking her shopping. Me teaching a 7-year-old Mason to make hand-drawn cards for everyone because we couldn't afford the expensive gifts Vanessa gave. With each clip, I felt the energy in the room shift. My mother's hand crept up to cover her mouth. My father stared at the floor. Caleb nodded slightly, as if each scene confirmed what he'd always known. Gregory's parents exchanged glances loaded with meaning. And Vanessa. Vanessa stood completely still, her face a mask of conflicting emotions as she watched proof after proof of my silent support, my consistent presence, my unconditional love, despite the growing imbalance in our relationship. The final sequence was the most painful to watch. Last Christmas, the broken vase incident. Mason had included the full clip, not just his accidental collision with the table, but what happened after. Gregory's cold comment about irreplaceable things, Vanessa's tight smile as she reassured me it was fine while her eyes said the opposite. But Mason hadn't stopped there. He'd included footage from later that same night, captured on someone's phone during the family game night. Vanessa, "Where's Becca?" My mother, "Cleaning up in the kitchen, I think." Caleb, "Again? She hasn't sat down all day." Vanessa, laughing, "That's Becca, always taking care of everyone." Then the camera had panned to show me through the kitchen doorway, quietly washing dishes while everyone else played games. The broken vase pieces carefully wrapped in newspaper beside me. The screen faded to black. Then Mason's message appeared. "Family isn't about perfect houses or expensive vases. It's about who shows up, even when it's hard." But there was something new added, something I hadn't seen when he showed me the rough cut. A final line appeared beneath. "Some things can't be replaced, like the years we waste not seeing each other clearly." The room was absolutely silent as the TV returned to its home screen. No one moved. No one seemed to even breathe. Mason stood beside the television, his face solemn, looking much older than his 12 years. Finally, Gregory's mother, Evelyn, broke the silence. "Well," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife, "that was certainly illuminating." She turned to look directly at Vanessa and Gregory. "I don't believe I raised my son to behave this way toward family." Gregory flushed, a defensive response clearly forming, but before he could speak, Vanessa made a small, choked sound. All eyes turned to her. She was crying. Not the pretty, controlled tears I'd seen her shed at weddings or during sentimental movies, but raw, messy, sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She looked at me, mascara already smudging beneath her eyes. "Becca," she gasped, the word barely audible. I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Part of me, the part that had been hurt and excluded and taken for granted, wanted to stand firm, to let her feel the full weight of what she'd done. But another part, the sister who remembered braiding Vanessa's hair for her first date, who had held her hand at our grandmother's funeral, ached to cross the room and pull her into a hug. Before I could decide, Vanessa moved toward me, her steps faltering. "I didn't see it," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't see what I was doing, what we were doing." I remained where I was, my emotions too complex to translate into movement. "That's the problem, Vanessa," I said quietly. "You never saw me, not really. You saw what I could do for you, how I could help, how I could make your life easier, better, more perfect, but you didn't see me." The honesty of my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She stopped a few feet away from me, swaying slightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how it got like this." From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother step forward, then hesitate. My father looked stricken, suddenly every one of his 68 years visible on his face. Caleb stood with his arms crossed, watching intently but making no move to intervene. "It got like this," I said carefully, "because everyone decided it was okay. Because it was easier to let me be the giver and Vanessa be the taker. Because no one, including me, ever said it wasn't fair." Gregory cleared his throat. "Look, I think we're being a bit dramatic here. It was just a Christmas invitation." "No," Vanessa interrupted, turning to face her husband. "She's right, Gregory. This isn't about Christmas. It's about years of imbalance, of taking Becca for granted." She looked around the room, her gaze landing on each family member in turn. "All of us taking her for granted." My mother stepped forward then, her hands twisting nervously together. "I didn't realize," she said softly. "I just thought, that's who you were, Rebecca. The helpful one, the strong one." "I am strong," I said, feeling a strange new power in speaking these truths aloud. "But that doesn't mean I don't need support too. That doesn't mean I should always be the one giving while everyone else takes." My father moved to stand beside my mother, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We've failed you," he said simply. The straightforward admission, so unusual from my conflict-avoidant father, nearly undid me. Mason, who had been silently watching this unfold, finally came to stand beside me. He slipped his hand into mine and squeezed gently. "I didn't make the video to make anyone feel bad," he said, addressing the room but looking directly at Vanessa. "I just wanted everyone to see what I see. My mom is the best person I know. She deserves to be treated like she matters." Vanessa's tears flowed faster at Mason's words. "You're right," she said, looking at her nephew with new respect. "She does matter. She's always mattered." She turned back to me, taking a tentative step closer. "I've been so caught up in creating the perfect life, the perfect image, that I forgot what's actually important." I felt my own eyes filling with tears, the wall of anger and hurt I'd built starting to crack despite my efforts to maintain it. "I miss my sister," Vanessa continued, her voice steadying. "I miss how we used to be, before I started caring more about impressing Gregory's parents than about the people who've loved me my whole life." She glanced apologetically at her in-laws, who surprisingly nodded in understanding. "Actually," Evelyn said dryly, "I've found the show you put on rather exhausting, Vanessa. I'd much prefer to know my real daughter-in-law, not this perfect hostess persona." A surprised laugh escaped Vanessa, though it mingled with her tears. "I've been trying so hard to be what I thought you wanted. What we want. Gregory's father spoke up for the first time, is for our son to be married to someone real, someone who values family the way we do. Gregory had the grace to look ashamed. He moved to stand beside Vanessa, placing a hand on her back. I haven't helped, he admitted. I've been inflexible about how things should be, about appearances. He looked at Mason. And I was completely out of line about that vase. It was just a thing, an object. It means nothing compared to family. The room fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence, contemplative rather than tense, thoughtful rather than shocked. Caleb broke it, clapping his hands together once. Well, now that we've had our Christmas miracle moment, what do you say we have some dessert? I'm guessing Rosa's cheesecake is being neglected. In the kitchen, his deliberate lightening of the mood was exactly what we needed. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. My mother wiped her eyes and nodded. Yes, dessert. And then we need to figure out sleeping arrangements. It's still storming outside. As the others began moving toward the kitchen, Vanessa remained in front of me. Becca, she said softly, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Not yet. But I want to try to earn it. I want to be better. To be the sister you deserve. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And saw beneath the perfect makeup and designer clothes to the sister I'd grown up with. The girl who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who'd borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them with stains. The young woman who'd drunk too much at my wedding and given an embarrassingly heartfelt toast that made everyone cry. Somewhere beneath the polished exterior of Vanessa Pemberton, my sister Nessa still existed. And despite everything, I still loved her. It won't be easy, I warned her. We can't just pretend none of this happened. She nodded, wiping carefully at her tears. I know. I don't want to pretend anymore. About anything. She hesitated. Then held out her hand to me, not moving to hug me, respecting that I might not be ready for that. Can we start again? Right now? I looked down at her outstretched hand, then at Mason, who nodded encouragingly. Finally, I reached out and took Vanessa's hand in mine. We can try, I said. And in that moment, I meant it. As we moved to join the others for dessert, Mason walked beside me, a small, satisfied smile on his face. I put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. You did a brave thing, I whispered. Thank you. He leaned into me, the wisdom in his young face both touching and slightly unsettling. Sometimes people just need to see the truth, Mom, even when it's hard to watch. The rest of the evening unfolded in a strange, new reality. We ate dessert together, the conversation careful but increasingly genuine. Plans were made for the following day, Christmas Eve, with my input actively sought for the first time in years. Gregory's sister Charlotte turned out to be warm and funny once. The tension dissipated, and his parents seemed genuinely interested in hearing about Mason's school and my work at the bookstore. Later, as Rosa and Vanessa showed us to the guest apartment above the garage, a charming space with a stunning view of the mountains, now obscured by the still falling snow, I felt exhausted but strangely peaceful. Nothing had been definitively resolved. Years of imbalance couldn't be corrected in a single evening, but something fundamental had shifted, and we all knew it. As Mason and I unpacked our overnight bags, he set his tablet carefully on the nightstand. Can I ask you something? I said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. He nodded, already changing into his pajamas. How did you know it would work? The video, I mean. How did you know they would actually see it, understand it? Mason considered. This, his expression thoughtful. I didn't know for sure, he admitted. But I remembered what you always tell me about the truth. That even when it's hard, it's better than pretending. I smiled, once again struck by how perceptive my son was. how he absorbed the lessons I tried to teach him and reflected them, back when I needed them most. "When did you get so wise?" I asked, echoing my question from days earlier. Mason grinned, suddenly looking like the 12-year-old boy he was rather than the old soul who had orchestrated tonight's revelation. "I get it from you, Mom," he said simply. "I was just paying attention." As he climbed into bed, exhausted from the long day, I stood by the window watching the snow transform the landscape into something new and clean. Tomorrow would be Christmas Eve. It wouldn't be perfect. The hurt wouldn't magically disappear, the patterns wouldn't instantly change. But we would be together, seen and acknowledged, no longer invisible. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift my son could have given any of us. Christmas Eve dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed sometime in the night. I woke early, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings until I remembered where we were. The guest apartment above Vanessa and Gregory's garage, unexpectedly welcomed into the family Christmas after all. Mason still slept soundly. In the bed beside mine, his face peaceful, his tablet now dark on the nightstand. Looking at him, I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly took my breath away. My son, with his quiet perception and unwavering courage, had done what I never could. He had made our family see the truth. I slipped out of bed and padded to the window. The view that had been obscured by snow last night was now revealed. In all its glory, mountains rising majestically in the distance, pine trees heavy with fresh snow, the valley below transformed into a perfect winter landscape. The sun glinted off the white expanse, creating a dazzling mosaic of light. For a long moment, I stood there absorbing the beauty, feeling oddly parallel to the scene before me. Like the landscape after the storm, everything looked different in the clear light of morning, cleaner, more defined, the obstacles more visible but somehow less threatening. When Mason finally stirred, we dressed and made our way to the main house. I felt a flutter of anxiety as we approached the kitchen, uncertain what the morning would bring. Would Vanessa have reverted to her polished, distant self overnight? Would Gregory's politeness have hardened back into cool tolerance? Would my parents have convinced themselves that last night's revelations were overblown, my hurt exaggerated? But when we entered, we found a scene so unexpectedly normal it stopped me in my tracks. Vanessa stood at the stove in pajamas and a robe, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, flipping pancakes while laughing at something Caleb had said. My father sat at the kitchen island reading a newspaper while my mother arranged bacon on a serving platter. Gregory was nowhere to be seen, but his parents sat at the table drinking coffee, still in their robes as well. It was so ordinary, so free of the usual careful orchestration that characterized Vanessa's hosting. No perfectly set table, no catered breakfast, no everyone dressed and camera ready before the first cup of coffee. "Good morning," I said hesitantly. Faces turned toward us, and to my surprise, they all broke into genuine smiles. "Morning, sleepyheads," Caleb called out. "Coffee's fresh." "Mason, sweetheart, are chocolate chips in your pancakes still your favorite?" Vanessa asked, gesturing with her spatula. Mason nodded, looking as surprised as I felt. "Yes, please." "Thought so." Coming right up. My mother came over and, to my astonishment, pulled me into a tight hug. "Merry Christmas Eve, dear," she said softly. Then, even more quietly, "I'm so sorry, Rebecca, for everything." The simple sincerity in her voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I hugged her back, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. The morning unfolded with a new kind of ease. We ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing naturally. Gregory appeared eventually, apologizing for oversleeping. His usual immaculate appearance rumpled and human. He poured coffee for everyone before taking his own, a small gesture that wouldn't have meant much if it hadn't been so out of character. After breakfast, unexpected news came from Evelyn. "Gregory, Vanessa, I've been thinking. Charles and I are going to check into that lodge down in the village. Vanessa looked startled. What? Why? There's no need. There is, Evelyn said firmly. This house is overflowing with Harlows who need time together. You don't need your in-laws underfoot. We're going to join them, Charlotte added, gesturing to her husband. Family time is important, but so is giving family space. Despite Vanessa and Gregory's protests, by noon, the Pemberton contingent had packed up and departed for the village lodge, promising to return for Christmas dinner the next day. Their absence changed the dynamic again, removing another layer of performance and pretense. The rest of Christmas Eve was unlike any family gathering I could remember. We made cookies together in the kitchen, flour dusting every surface as Mason taught everyone his special decorating technique. We went sledding on the hill behind the house, my father shocking everyone by racing Caleb to the bottom and winning. We built a snowman family, arguing good-naturedly about whether the smallest one should have Mason's features or mine. There were still moments of tension, of course. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. At one point, I found myself automatically clearing everyone's mugs after hot chocolate, falling into my habitual caretaker role without thinking. Vanessa noticed and gently took the tray from my hands. I've got this, she said. Go sit by the fire. Later, during a card game, Gregory made a cutting remark about my strategy. The table fell silent, everyone suddenly on edge. Then he blinked, seeming to realize how he'd sounded. Sorry, he said, surprising me. That came out wrong. I meant it as a joke, but it wasn't funny. Small moments, perhaps, but significant in their acknowledgement of the dynamics Mason's video had exposed. That evening, as we gathered in the great room to watch Christmas movies, I found myself sitting beside Vanessa on the couch. As It's a Wonderful Life played on the enormous screen, she leaned over and whispered to me. I've been thinking about what happened with the vase last year, she said. I want you to know that I never cared about it. Not really. I was just so worried about impressing Gregory's parents that I lost perspective. I studied her face, searching for the familiar mask of perfection, but all I saw was my sister, vulnerable and sincere. Why does their approval matter so much to you? I asked gently. She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Finally, she sighed. Because I always felt like I was playing a role with them, like the real me, messy, emotional, imperfect me, wouldn't be good enough. She glanced at me, a sad smile touching her lips. I guess I've been doing that with everyone, haven't I? Including you. The real you was always enough for me, I told her. That's the sister I've missed. She reached for my hand then, squeezing it tightly. I'm trying to find her again, she whispered. I think she got lost somewhere between trying to be perfect and forgetting what actually matters. On the other side of me, Mason leaned against my shoulder, his eyes drooping as he fought to stay awake for the movie. I put my arm around him, holding him close as the familiar story played out on screen. George Bailey discovering how much he mattered to the people in his life, how his quiet acts of kindness and sacrifice had changed everything, even when he couldn't see it himself. The parallel wasn't lost on me. Like George, I had felt invisible, undervalued, unappreciated. And like George, it had taken someone else, my son, to show everyone exactly what they'd been missing all along. Christmas morning arrived with the magical quality that seems reserved only for that day. Mason woke me early, his excitement impossible to contain despite the emotional roller coaster of the previous days. We joined the family downstairs, where the enormous tree was now surrounded by even more presents, including the ones we had brought. The gift exchange was different. This year, instead of the usual rapid unwrapping, with expensive presents earning the most attention, each gift was opened with care, the giver explaining the thought behind it. My handmade presents, the leather journal for my father, the vintage brooch for my mother, the rare vinyl for Caleb, the first edition book for Vanessa, were received with genuine appreciation rather than polite acknowledgement. And when Mason unwrapped the tablet accessories Gregory and Vanessa had hastily purchased for him in the village the night before, a clear last-minute addition to make up for the uninvitation, his gratitude was sincere. Because it wasn't about the gifts, had never been about the gifts. It was about being seen, being valued, being included. Later that day, as everyone prepared for Christmas dinner, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother. She was struggling to chop vegetables. For the salad, her arthritic hands making the task difficult. "Let me help," I said automatically, reaching for the knife. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, Rebecca, not this time." She set the knife down and turned to face me fully. "I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me." I nodded, surprised by her directness. "I failed you," she said simply. "As a mother, I failed to see what was happening. How we made you feel like your only value was in what you could do for others. How we rewarded Vanessa's shine while taking your steadiness for granted." I swallowed hard, unprepared for this confrontation despite everything that had happened. "Mom, it's okay." "No, it's not," she interrupted firmly. "It's not okay. And I need to acknowledge that. We've treated you unfairly for years, and then we had the audacity to act surprised when you were hurt by being excluded from Christmas." Her voice broke slightly. "A mother should never make her child feel invisible, and that's exactly what I did." I didn't know what to say. My mother had never been one for emotional conversations or admitting mistakes. This level of self-awareness was entirely new. "What changed?" I asked finally. "Besides Mason's video, I mean." She smiled sadly. "I saw myself through your eyes, and I didn't like what I saw." She picked up the knife again, turning it thoughtfully in her hands. "You know, my mother did the same thing to me, made me feel like I was never quite enough. I swore I wouldn't do that to my children, but somehow I still did, just in a different way." I reached out and touched her arm. "We can do better now." "All of us?" "Yes," she agreed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We can, and we will." That evening, as we all gathered around Vanessa's dining table for Christmas dinner, Gregory's parents and sister joining us from the village lodge, I looked around at the faces of my family. My father, more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. My mother sharing a joke with Mason. Caleb helping Vanessa serve rather than waiting to be served. Gregory making a visible effort to engage with everyone equally. And Vanessa herself, my sister, my childhood companion, my sometime rival, looking more like the girl I'd grown up with than the polished, perfect woman she'd been pretending to be. Her hair was slightly messy, her sweater had a small gravy stain from cooking, and she laughed without covering her mouth the way she usually did. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, old habits that slipped through, unspoken tensions that would take more than a Christmas miracle to resolve completely. But it was real, and that made all the difference. 3 days later, as Mason and I packed our car to head home, the family gathered on the front steps to say goodbye. Hugs were exchanged, promises to call more often were made, plans for a summer visit were discussed. When it came to Vanessa's turn to say goodbye, she pulled me aside slightly from the others. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for having the courage to show up even after I tried to push you away," I smiled. "Thank Mason. I was ready to give up." She glanced at my son, who was fist-bumping with Caleb by the car. "He's extraordinary. He sees things most adults miss." "He gets that from his father," I said, then corrected myself. "No, actually. He gets it from me. I've always seen people clearly. I just stopped believing what I saw mattered." Vanessa hugged me then, a fierce, tight embrace that felt like a promise. "It matters," she whispered. "You matter, Becca. So much." As we drove away, Mason beside me, the mountains receding in our rearview mirror, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was clear. The storm behind us, the future uncertain but full of possibility. Was it worth it? I asked Mason. Coming here, I mean, even after they tried to shut us out. He considered this, his expression thoughtful. Yes, he said finally, because now they see us, really see us. And that changes everything, doesn't it? I reached over and squeezed his hand, my wise, brave son who had taught his family the true meaning of Christmas, with nothing but truth and love. Yes, I agreed. It changes everything. Driving home that day, I thought about the power of being truly seen, not for what you can give or do, but for who you are. I thought about the courage it takes to stand up and say, I matter too. I thought about how children often understand instinctively what adults have forgotten, that love isn't about perfection or performance, but about honesty and connection. Mason had done more than save our Christmas. He had given all of us the gift of truth. It wasn't wrapped in shiny paper or tied with a perfect bow. It was messy and uncomfortable and at times painful to witness. But it was real. And in a world of carefully curated social media posts and picture-perfect holiday cards, real was the rarest gift of all. As we turned onto our street, our modest house coming into view with its simple decorations and lopsided snowman in the front yard, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was home. This was real. This was enough. And so was I. Have you ever received a text message that made your entire world collapse? I have. But I've also witnessed what happens when someone brave enough, someone who loves you enough, refuses to let that collapse define you. Sometimes it takes a child to remind us of what matters. Sometimes it takes being uninvited from Christmas to find your way back home. Not to a perfect house in the mountains, but to the imperfect, beautiful truth of who you really are. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know that you're not alone. Know that you matter. Know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply show up, even when, especially when, you haven't been invited. And if you're lucky enough to have someone in your life who sees you clearly, who stands beside you when others look away, hold on to them. Thank them. Be that person for someone else when you can, because in the end, that's what family really means. Not perfect houses or expensive vases or impressive Christmas dinners, but seeing each other, hearing each other, showing up for each other, again and again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart or made you think about the relationships in your own life, I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about family, healing, and the messy, beautiful journey of becoming visible again after years of feeling unseen. Until next time, this is Rebecca, signing off, seen, heard, and finally, gloriously, unapologetically present. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.